A vision of Britain's green future. Whiteley, just outside Glasgow, is the UK's biggest onshore wind farm, a sign of the changing landscape. But the economic landscape is also likely to change, with new green taxes and new green tariffs that could impact all of our lives. Today, the International Trade Secretary told us that among the measures she's considering is a carbon border adjustment tax, imposing charges on imports whose manufacture harms the environment.
I'd rather see a multilateral approach than a unilateral approach of individual carbon border adjustments. It is certainly something that we will need to look at in the future if it's the case that we don't have the net zero targets agreed across the board.
While it might be some way off, if implemented, this could be a very big deal indeed. Why? It all comes back to the line on this chart, UK carbon emissions, and look, they're on the way down. But here's the thing, our total carbon footprint, the black line, is a lot higher. Why? Because all of the carbon-intensive goods we're importing from Asia, Europe and elsewhere. So while domestic producers have to pay green levies and obey green regulations, foreign producers sometimes don't. That's where a carbon border adjustment comes in, making them pay the equivalent costs when their goods pass the border. Now, we know government is thinking about doing it. The question is how soon?
I think in the real world, we have to appreciate that the EU is moving ahead unilaterally with its own carbon border adjustment mechanism. We've seen a proposal from the Democrats in the US just this week of something similar. There's also talk of Canada proposing a carbon border adjustment mechanism unilaterally as well. And in that context, the UK, I don't think, can afford to put its head in the sand.
That could lead to international tension. Here at the BAE shipyards in Glasgow, Liz Truss was inspecting the new Type 26 frigates, another export of sorts since the version is being adapted for the Australian Navy. For other manufacturers, however, the real concern is that if Britain pushes on to net zero, they could lose out to foreign competitors.
We entirely support the need for carbon fair trade, and we want to make sure that UK manufacturers who have to bear the UK's carbon costs don't find themselves undercut by imports from countries that don't match the UK's carbon ambition.
In the end, it's about fairness. It's all very well UK companies going green, but if other countries around the world don't have similarly strict rules, then you run the risk of this country being flooded with cheap and pollutive goods. It's essentially the worst of both worlds. You potentially lose domestic jobs, and at the same time, you're indirectly contributing to global carbon emissions. And that is where this tax comes in. For a long time, taxes like this were an academic fantasy. Now, as Britain reshapes its economic landscape, they are feeling more and more real. Ed Conway, Sky News in Glasgow.